Hello and welcome back to After Whistle Sports Podcast. I'm back again with some more college football news. I'm here joined by Jonathan Lidskin, a big college basketball fan, big college sports guy in general. You can listen to his stuff on Marathon to March. Really good, and I really want to bring him along because he has a little bit of a different perspective because he goes to an SEC school. He's a Duke fan, so he also is a fan of ACC stuff.
Ties in a lot of different places.
Yeah, also brings in the basketball perspective. So
thanks for having me on, by the way. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, it's awesome. And so it should be a really good conversation. Of course, we're going to be talking about the whole conference realignment news. Recently, this was sparked by USC and UCLA joining the Big Ten starting the 2024 season. It's just absolutely absurd.
Yeah.
Basically, overnight, we found out that USC and UCLA were going to leave the Pac-12, and that kind of sparked a chain of events that are still, we're recording this, on Tuesday, July 5th, and I assume that at the end of this week we'll have even more news about maybe other teams leaving conferences. There's been talk about what other Pac-12 schools are going to do because they lost their basically two biggest cash cows in UCLA and USC. There's been talk about what the ACC is going to do, what Notre Dame is going to do, and just to refresh everyone, the whole recent conference realignment stuff was all sparked earlier with Texas and Oklahoma last year, leaving the Big 12 and going to the SEC. I believe that's also in 2024, right? Or 2025?
Yeah, 2025. I think that starts.
Yeah, 2025.
Yeah. It's kind of interesting how USC and UCLA was kind of the Big Ten's counter move to the SEC, and now both conferences and then the Big 12's kind of below them, but they're all scrambling to figure out which teams are going to be in our conference in 3 years and whatnot.
Yeah, in reality, it's an arms race between ESPN and the SEC. Of course, the big broadcaster for college football in the SEC has been driven by ESPN, and then Fox is supposed to get a large percentage of the broadcasting rights and media rights in the Big Ten. So it seems like both of these major two conferences, these are now the two main football conferences, are basically trying to acquire some sort of they're acquiring programs who are hopefully going to raise their valuations for when they have to sign an agreement with a media provider, which I believe the Big Ten ends in 2024 or 2023, which makes sense with why they bring on USC and UCLA for that time. But what they want to do is they want to raise the price so Fox can spend billions of dollars on Big Ten football, which will now be hopefully more competitive and will definitely be more competitive.
Yeah.
And it will be more popular nationwide with these new acquisitions.
Yeah, and it's just super interesting how most people don't understand that everything in this is driven by TV and media deals. This would not be happening if we weren't about to see the increase that we're going to in college football and just conference media deals in general. And I've said for years that the Pac-12 was kind of going to get left behind when this happened because the Pac-12 isn't a moneymaker. They haven't had a team in the college football playoff since 2016 when Washington was there. They typically only have one team in the New Year's six games. And frankly, their times and current TV deal are awful. The Pac-12 network is impossible to get access to. Nobody can watch it. And a lot of their games will start at just absurd times when nobody on the East Coast and in Central Time are going to watch their games.
Yeah, back when the original rounds, I believe this was 8 to 10 years ago, back when the original rounds of TV network deals were being finalized with all these conferences making new deals, getting more money into their conferences, Larry Scott and the Pac-12 were really behind the curve on that. They never seemed to have a good marketing scheme. They didn't quite understand how they could make the most out of the few popular football brands they had. And part of that reason was because, again, USC and UCLA were really two of the only, I guess, Oregon and Washington you throw in there as well, but none of the other schools were huge national brands. And of course, people watched college football in LA, one of the largest media markets, but they weren't watching Pac-12 football most of the time. They were watching on a national scale what the games were on. So the Pac-12 to me, and we'll talk about this a little bit later when we go through what some of the other conferences might have to do in order to survive. But Pac-12 seems to have a very small chance at regaining any sort of relevancy in the college football playoff era or in this new era of the billion-dollar industry.
Yeah, and their path would be if the Big 12 teams came to them, which doesn't seem likely right now considering the Big 12 just added teams. But no, the Pac-12 is toast, frankly, right now. USC is now just becoming good again. UCLA has started really getting serious again. Oregon just lost their coach, who was one of the reasons that USC was kind of failing in a large part. And then Washington had their kind of stretch, but kind of botched the coaching hire after Chris Peterson left. So and Stanford's kind of regaining their footing. And those are your five. Those are the five that people care about in the Pac-12. The rest of the conference is kind of just being kicked to the curb, and you could even say top three, I guess, if you want to throw Oregon and Washington in the group with the rest.
Yeah, also, I understand it for the sake of USC and UCLA, and those who followed college football on a national scale earlier, they could see that USC and UCLA were really carrying a lot of the load. They're making so much more money and bringing in so much more revenue for the Pac-12 than all these other schools that it didn't make sense for them to be treated the same, right? There's no reason why Washington State and USC should be making the same amount when the amount of revenue they bring into the conference was nowhere close to any sort of semblance of similarity.
Yeah, I mean USC, even the last couple of years when they've really struggled, they played in a Rose Bowl. Yep. They won a Rose Bowl. They played in a Cotton Bowl. These teams are playing for way more than anyone else in their conference, and you do have those gaps in other conferences, but it's not as large, and the conferences are already a lot more stable there.
And also there was no real investment arms race within the football programs in the Pac-12 like we saw in the SEC and the Big Ten. For example, the Big Ten has traditional blue blood football superpowers, but they've also seen, with their success, that other schools have invested heavily in their football programs.
Yeah.
Rutgers went out and got Greg Schiano again. They've invested heavily. Teams like Iowa have invested heavily in football, and you didn't see that with the Pac-12. And I think that's part of the reason why USC and UCLA were kind of mad at the direction the Pac-12 was heading in, especially in a time where the money's bigger than ever.
Yeah,
want to slice it.
And the SEC is the same way. You have programs now in the SEC that you would never think of being football programs now, or Kentucky has had national relevance the last couple of years. Yep. Mizzou has started to invest in their football program very heavily. I'm trying to think of others. South Carolina is on the up and coming.
Arkansas for sure.
Arkansas, their turnaround was just unbelievable from year to year. So these programs recognize that this new TV deal is coming, and they kind of they want to be a part of it. They want to be relevant when this comes around because they know how much money's in play.
An increase of about $70 million annually for a team like USC and UCLA. For any team, you can't say no to that.
Right.
I think they were making probably $30 million in their old deal with the Pac-12. Again, that number would probably increase in the next round of TV rights, but it's nowhere near the $100 million that's being thrown around for the Fox and Big Ten deal. So if you have national relevance, and you're a program like Notre Dame, a program like UNC, which we may talk about later, a program like Clemson, Miami, you're looking around to the SEC and the Big Ten, and you're wanting a piece of that pie, right? And now the hard part is for the Big Ten and the SEC is who do you now go after and get who can increase that pie for everyone?
Right, and for the Big Ten and SEC, they're probably going to target ACC schools. The Big Ten, obviously Notre Dame makes a lot of sense geographically, and just the fact that they have a huge brand makes a ton of sense, and rivals in the Big Ten already.
It's Notre Dame is and has been forever has been the past the number one option for the Big Ten. That is who they want. They're a top 5 college football brand. They're nationally relevant. They're in the region. They have great, strong academics, and they just fit what the Big Ten does. And to me, the reason you get USC and UCLA is to get Notre Dame.
Yeah.
That's why you do it. Of course, it would be fine if they don't get Notre Dame and just end up at 16 teams, but that's not where I think the conference is heading. I think the conference is going to get 20 teams. So basically 4 new ones on top of the new acquisitions of USC and UCLA. And I think the SEC is going to follow suit and do the same thing.
Yeah, and then another big thing about Notre Dame that I don't know if many people realize is they play a lot of ACC teams pretty much on a yearly basis. Mm-hmm. Like they'll rotate teams, but like you get Notre Dame to the Big Ten, like the ACC is then their teams are losing a game because Notre Dame plays all those teams.
Notre Dame isn't even like a full member of the ACC, and yet they drive still a lot of the football revenue to that conference.
Yeah.
And again, I guess we could talk about it now from the perspective of the Big Ten, and the SEC. And this is maybe like a cool exercise we can do, but I saw this. I forgot who tweeted this, but it was like a draft basically between.
I think it was
Big
Aaron
10,
Torres.
It might have been the Big Ten and the SEC, and we could basically take turns picking who we think's the best fit for these conferences, and kind of like maybe give our reasoning for why they fit that conference. I don't know. We could. Do you want the SEC or the Big Ten?
I'll take the SEC. Why don't we take the conferences?
I'll do the Big Ten. Since the Big Ten has the momentum, I'll be the first to pick as well. And obviously, we talked about it, but Notre Dame is the number one option for the Big Ten. I don't know if I could do like a double pick here because like you take Notre Dame and Stanford, but
you can take them both. I'll make the next.
I doubt the SEC is going to go after Stanford, but Stanford is a team in the Pac-12 that I believe fits the Big Ten, of course, with like the academic prowess that they have, like fits with what the Big Ten wants. They do have football history. Like they're not like the biggest in some like in terms of like the football brands, but they also have a lot of other sports that they're big in, the Olympic sports. To me, they seem like a Big Ten option, and you bring them with Notre Dame as another piece. So Notre Dame could join the Big Ten. All of a sudden, they have USC, Stanford, so like 2 of their bigger rivals, Michigan and Ohio State, and like that should be enough. And so I think those 2 make a lot of sense. I'll let you go with SEC.
And real quick, just another thing about Stanford that people like I probably don't think about is if you get Stanford, like, and with USC and UCLA as well, like the Big Ten actually might down the line start being able to make money on baseball too.
That's true.
Which is, it's not a huge part, but...
Can I talk about my proposition here? I haven't heard this anywhere, but as like a Big Ten baseball fan, which is definitely very hard because we're a major conference, one of the biggest problems with the Big Ten is that recruiting-wise, they don't play games. Like, they can't play games at the start of the season, whereas the Southern schools and the ACC schools in the warmer weather are allowed to play games so much earlier. So the Big Ten schools have to travel across the country to even play in games. They have no home games. So I think what you should do if the Big Ten does have that West Coast presence is they should just like run basically like tournaments or games in the months where it's too cold to have it in the Big Ten region. Run those games in UCLA and USC, and I think you would actually make the conference somewhat formidable in the sense that they could actually play real baseball, professional baseball, which
for sure
I would like to see. But
so the SEC in this situation, like I think the easy 2 picks for the SEC here are Clemson and Miami. Clemson is the biggest football brand. They've been the only program to consistently be on Alabama's level the last couple years in college football, and like this, like the only things that are being considered here are football and academics. Like as much as I like basketball and like college basketball is by far my favorite sport. Like this basketball has mostly nothing to do with this because football is the huge moneymaker in this. And then while Miami is down right now, they're kind of in the same like situation that like USC, Texas, like some of those programs are, where like they could be just dreadful, like they've been the past couple years at times, and they'll still make a ton of money. So
I would like to have a note on Clemson because at first I was so set on Clemson and SEC. I thought it made a ton of sense in terms of like the recency of Clemson football and what they've been able to do. There's something to note though is like when you're making these decisions, you don't want to make a decision on like based on recency, right? Like Clemson has been amazing under Dabo Swinney, at least like in the past 5 years, but their football history itself is not great. Is not great. I mean, they won a national championship in 1981, but they have a their fan base itself is not that big. Like, they wouldn't be a fan base up there with Alabama, Georgia, maybe even teams like Florida. Like,
Tennessee.
They would be probably a mid-level. They just don't have that many students, too, or alumni. And Clemson's just, to me, it's interesting because if you're the SEC, you don't want to pick up a team because they've done really well recently and then maybe Dabo does something else or something happens and the school doesn't have the history, the tradition, the resources necessary to keep up their level of success. Yeah. And now all of a sudden you have another team in there that you're splitting your revenue with who's not bringing in that same amount. Yeah.
They just lost both their coordinators. So it's definitely possible that you're onto something here.
Again, if you think that Clemson will be a top 20 program for the next 20 years, then you take
good investment. Yeah,
you're
good
fine
investment.
With that. But they're not a team where you can just they're not even like UCLA where you can acquire UCLA. They might suck, but they still have that LA market. Right? Yeah, they still have that West Coast presence. You acquire Clemson, it's not really out of region. So those same college football fans in that region are probably going to watch.
You have an argument that they're not even the biggest brand in their own state in your conference,
and they're watching SEC football anyways,
right?
Yeah. How many? If you look at the state of South Carolina, how many of them are watching SEC football versus ACC football, non-Clemson?
Right.
That's where you have to make the distinction. If I was the SEC, I would take Clemson just for that come back at the Big Ten just to get some more momentum, but. People are saying this is a done deal, a home run acquisition. I'm a little bit more hesitant on that.
I get that.
Again, I think that makes sense as a pick.
I think with Miami, people won't realize this right off the bat, but Miami does give the SEC a different market. Florida, obviously 100%. In the same state, but is Florida and Miami are 6-7 hours apart, completely different places. Miami's way southern Florida, and it gets those people because you go to Miami, your first thought isn't sporting events, it gets people who
so Miami live in Miami. They can't even fill up their stadium. Yeah. It's 45 minutes away from the campus.
Right, which is just that's the argument against it is that their fan base has something preventing it from being SEC level right now.
But they've been SEC level. They have an SEC level history. I would love Miami in the SEC, to be honest. I think they would lose a lot of games.
I think they would too. Their problem is that with their stadium location, they only fill their stadium when they're really good. That Notre Dame game that they had, I think in 2017 when they were undefeated, that stadium was packed. One of the loudest stadiums I've ever heard in college football. But what happens if Miami goes to the SEC and they're still going 6-6, 7-5 in seasons?
What about this? I haven't really heard this that much, but Miami to the Big Ten. You think that would fit or no?
It gives them a different market, which is what you were talking about.
Yeah.
So it gives them that aspect, and Miami, the reason they're so big is because their donors, I think, are insane.
Miami also, to me, it just seems it would fit the Big Ten a little bit.
What do you mean by that?
In terms of just the school, the academics seem to fit the Big Ten a little bit more than the SEC. But again, the SEC is a wide variety of schools and programs. But Miami just seems they're really well-rounded in terms of their athletic department.
Mm-hmm. It's a good school.
It's a good school. I think there's honestly a solid amount of Big Ten transplants that live in that area of Florida. So I think it makes sense from that perspective as well. I don't think that they move the needle so much for the Big Ten to have them at the top list of their choices. But I think if the Big Ten strikes out on some of the other choices, they might take a look.
Yeah. I said, I think Miami's kind of in the Texas USC tier just because their donors are ridiculous.
Yeah, but I think Miami might. There are some Miami administrators who would prefer a Big Ten move instead of an SEC move. From the perspective of Miami, I think some people or some fans would rather be in the Big Ten than the SEC.
Yeah, maybe. I think
it's not up to them.
No. I think it certainly helps them competitively from that standpoint.
Yeah,
but
they would have huge recruiting pitch being in that South, the Southern school in the Big Ten.
The SEC schools are already recruiting.
Yeah, talk about Southern schools in the Big Ten. So I don't think we're either going to pick these for ours, but I've heard a little bit maybe yesterday on Twitter about Georgia Tech to the Big Ten.
Okay.
And that's been, even in the first rounds of the Big Ten realignment where they got, I believe, like it was Maryland, Rutgers, Nebraska, those guys.
Mm-hmm.
They were talking about Georgia Tech because you have that Atlanta market, that Southern school academically fits the Big Ten. I don't know if I would personally take Georgia Tech or even look at them just because of how poor their football program is currently.
Yeah.
But they have history. They have the market. Again, I'm not sure how much individual like cable markets are anymore because like these like Fox and ESPN are looking at it from like a streaming perspective too. So it's like, who cares if people are going to buy the local TV package for like Big Ten football?
Yeah.
But it's worth noting, because I don't know if we're going to touch on them on this podcast, that Georgia Tech has been linked in some capacity to wanting to be in the Big Ten.
And like it makes sense because they have history, like you said. It gives them the Atlanta market. And the other thing about Georgia Tech is they've kind of had a like transition period because they ran the triple option for the longest time in football. And when their coach retired, you have to hire a new coach. You either have to hire a new triple option coach, which there aren't many of them, or you have to go a completely different system. And when you take players from a triple option system and try to run something else, it's going to take a while to adjust to that.
Yeah, and also Jeff Collins is really terrible. The coach, he's bad. So I don't really know. Again, I've seen arguments that the Big Ten would like it to get into that Georgia recruiting market. But again, like, the national brands are going to recruit nationally no matter what. I think that's also overstated. Like, people are saying how the Big Ten, it's so big for the Big Ten that USC and UCLA are joining so they can get into the California market. No, like, the top schools who would be getting those types of kids are getting them with or without USC or UCLA being in the Big Ten. I think that argument of recruiting, like, footprint is overblown. But, again, I could be wrong. I'm just...
So who would be your third pick for the Big Ten?
Okay, my third pick for the Big Ten. This is really interesting because I do like Oregon. But the more I think about it...
The thing with them is, like, you, like, think, like, oh, like, different portion of the country, different market, but, like, their market's not that big.
They don't have many people that live there.
No.
No one lives in Oregon.
Like, the Pacific Northwest is not a populated place.
Literally no one lives there.
That, like, it's kind of like the argument against, like, Seattle getting the NBA team back.
Yeah.
And, like, it's the same thing here.
Man, I don't know. I said Stanford, Notre Dame already. I feel pretty confident on those two. I would take them. Okay.
Yeah.
I honestly think that both Notre Dame and Stanford have a silent agreement with the Big Ten anyway. So we'll see if that happens.
I would not be surprised.
Listen, I haven't seen anything about Stanford. Like, well, I've seen some stuff, but we've seen mostly Oregon and Washington to the Big Ten, and I think that's because Oregon and Washington are trying to put that out there.
Yeah.
The more silent Stanford is, the more confident I feel that they're in the Big Ten already. But there's a real drop-off here, and I'm not even sure at this point the Big Ten takes more teams. UNC would be my pick.
Yeah, that would make the most sense.
Would be my pick. They extend the brand further East Coast, like good all-around school. Like, they're the Michigan of the East Coast.
Yeah.
Like, they make sense. They definitely make sense.
And they make you money on basketball,
yeah,
too.
Big flagship program, making money in basketball, big brand.
Good donors.
It just makes sense. Like, academically it makes sense. They're an AAU school, which for those not who are not as familiar with college realignment, that's been like one of the main things in the Big Ten is the AAU, which is I believe it's like an academic research funding share within like type thing within the conference. And so it brings in like billions of dollars of research money for the Big Ten. So they like to acquire other schools who can help with that funding. UNC is one of those. They just fit. They fit. They seem like a perfect option to me. Yeah.
For the SEC, I think my next one would probably be Florida State then. Just because, like they're really down right now. And I don't know if Mike Norvell is a good coach or not. I'm leaning towards he's not a good coach. But they're a big enough brand that they have a fan base that'll make you money anyway.
Florida State's really interesting because they are in the region as well.
Yeah.
So you would take Clemson over Florida State in like your order. If you're the SEC, you could take any schools.
I honestly think my first pick would be Miami, and then I think I would go Clemson and Florida State.
Yeah.
Because like at least with Miami, like they're trending towards being back to where they were. Florida State isn't close right now. Not even
Florida
remotely.
State is also interesting because again, like they do have a little bit more of that football history and like successful football history you want. But like Florida's gonna be pissed if Florida State joins.
Yeah.
Right. Which I don't even think the SEC cares about what Florida has to say.
But like the SEC, like they have teams in like the same locations and like it's working. Like like those are obviously established programs.
If you're just trying to field teams to get to 20 or to get like that number, then you of course take Florida State.
Yeah.
And I think that's what they'll do. So again, I'm fine with that. Then I guess my next few picks for the Big Ten, it should be Oregon. I'm still really skeptical because if I was talking about Clemson being a team that might fall, like people might be putting too much faith in their like recent success. Oregon's like the exact same, even more. Like they've been artificially created as a football factory due to Nike and Phil Knight.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really Oregon's so interesting. Because they've been really good in football. They've been a large brand with the whole like Nike and the jerseys
like,
and everything.
Maybe after a couple years in the Big Ten, they do make you like a lot of money because like people become more invested in them.
Yeah, personally, like I don't think if the Big Ten really wanted Oregon and Washington, they would have taken them already.
Mm-hmm.
They would have taken them with USC and UCLA.
Yeah,
and something tells me, and again, like I don't have any sources for this, but just from like I'm thinking through what some of these teams or athletic departments are and presidents are like working through. I don't think USC and UCLA really care to have Oregon in the Big Ten. I don't think I really don't, and I don't think the Big Ten needs Oregon.
Like,
and so then why do you take them if they're not going to increase your revenue as a conference and they're not going to bring in new eyes or new eyeballs in the TV market? Then you take them for the colorful jerseys, like why do you try?
Like the question has to be like, what are they doing for you?
Yeah,
and
what does Oregon give you?
And like, I don't like. Neither of those programs have super rich histories.
Well, a national competitor.
Like they do give you that, but like I keep coming back to the fact that like their fan bases aren't like big enough to support what the Big Ten wants.
Yeah, well, Oregon itself, like the state of Oregon doesn't have many people, but the Oregon like brand does travel. Like it is one of the large. I think it's like a top 25 brand in college football. So you can't discount that.
Mm-hmm.
But and they fit the Big Ten. They're AAU, like with the research agreement. They are like a large state school. Like they seem to fit it, but I don't know if the Big Ten needs them. They don't. They don't need them.
No.
So as like. They probably really want to be in the Big Ten. That's probably their preferred choice, but it's really interesting. If Notre Dame can't get Stanford on board, I think Oregon's going to be the team that goes on, but I don't know. I think they talk to UNC first.
Like the SEC, then a final pick would be so interesting because
I think the SEC might take. Would the SEC take Oregon?
I don't think so because
they need a West Coast brand.
I know, but like they're already made. Like
Dan Lanning is there.
I know. Yeah, they're already making so much money though that like I'm not sure. Like they're like bottom tier schools are making like upwards of $40 million already, which is pretty good for like the Kentucky and Mizzou and Vanderbilt brands.
In terms of the arms race though, like the next Big Ten deal, if the SEC does nothing, which they're not going to do nothing, the Big Ten would sign a larger deal. So the SEC is playing from behind. I think they ultimately end up on top, but currently they're playing from behind. They need to make a splash.
I was thinking like potentially like going northeast for them and like maybe Boston College because
chance.
But because like think about it, really good school, up and coming football program.
SEC and Boston College.
Yeah, I mean it gives you a market, it gives you a different region.
If you were to tell me out of all the ACC teams that fit the SEC.
Boston College definitely not it.
Boston College wouldn't even be in my top 8 or 9. Like Boston College, again, I get it from a standpoint of they're looking to acquire like new markets, but if you go after why don't you just go after UNC if they really want?
Well, what if UNC's already gone? Like in the situation, UNC's already gone.
Then they go south. I guess
if you're Georgia Tech, like. Dude, like they don't need teams. Like they don't need Georgia Tech. Dude,
they would get Oregon.
The SEC's capital is Atlanta, so like they don't need Georgia Tech.
Listen, I think the SEC is concerned with the fact that the West Coast is going to be a Big Ten conference or like be part of the Big Ten footprint, and that's a large part of the TV market that you need. Like that is, and honestly, I think in terms of like the Big Ten transplants, a lot of them are in the West Coast anyways, and so you're playing from behind. The culture fit is more Big Ten in the West Coast anyways. I think the SEC might want to get a West Coast school. And Oregon would be so... Dude, how interesting would it be?
Oregon and the SEC.
And they're like politics in the SEC.
So like the SEC has like started to... like not started, they have been for years now, but they've been playing like SEC schools at neutral sites in the South in their non-conference games. Like Washington went and played Auburn one year. Oregon went and played Auburn one year. USC was, I think, supposed to play Bama 2 years ago. So, like, it's kind of already, like, they're kind of already trying to get into the South in some aspect. I just, does Oregon make the SEC money? Like, I think it's...
It might.
Like, it could be the same argument.
No, it might. Yeah, but, like, the SEC might be willing to lose money on, like, with that one school if that means they can capture more of the West Coast market. You know what I'm saying? Because like the reason the Oregon won't make money for the Big Ten is because they already have USC and UCLA and probably Stanford. So, like the opportunity cost is much greater for the Big Ten like versus the SEC. Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about. So we went through the big boys. Okay, they're going to be doing whatever they want. Now let's go through the smaller conference who don't have that choice, and they're scrambling to pick up teams to keep their conference alive. Okay, and there's been some crazy rumors. This is like the most fun part of the conference realignment. Like I've heard craziness,
unbelievable stuff.
I've heard like a coastal conference with the remaining Pac-12 schools, which again there might not be many after the Big 12, Big 10, and the SEC is done with them. But the Pac-12 schools and the ACC schools combining to create like a coastal coastal conference. I've seen stuff that says the Big 12 is going to get Oregon and Washington, which if I'm Oregon and Washington, I'm holding that deal off as long as possible to see what the Big 10 does. I've seen the one like constant I've seen is that Arizona State, Colorado, Utah will be acquired by the Big 12. And to me, that makes sense for both parties. Big 12 is going to want more dogs in the fight. Yeah. They're trying to become that third conference behind the Big 10 and the SEC in terms of competing on the football landscape. In the region, makes a ton of sense. That's a pretty good conference.
And Utah's good. Utah's
really
a good program.
And listen, honestly, Utah fits the Big 10. Yeah. I was close to picking Utah for my Big 10 pick. Honestly, like
get different market.
Utah gets Urban Meyer back, hires back Urban Meyer.
You're sold. You're sold.
I'm sold instantly. But
Kyle Whittingham not selling you.
Yeah. Also, the storylines are incredible. Like Colorado leaving the Big 12, going to the Pac-12, and now leaving the Pac-12, going back to the Big 12 is incredible. I've seen like Pitt maybe joining the Big 12, which I think is their natural spot. Anyways,
yeah, I mean West Virginia rivalry. They play them this year, I think. So it'd be cool to see that back.
Very interesting. I've seen like ACC schools joining the Big 12 possibly. Just we're not sure about that yet.
I'm guessing that would be like a Virginia Tech and a Virginia.
That would definitely be Virginia Tech and Virginia.
Yeah, because Virginia Tech does have some sort of a brand for football.
But Arizona State, Colorado, Utah makes a ton of sense for the Big 12. That is a good third conference. Probably not a mid-major, too.
No, not a mid-major.
Just a step below, which is nice.
And,
that's what you want.
And the thing is, like, they would still have a fighting chance every year of being the best basketball conference.
Yeah. No, they
with
would.
What they have.
For sure. And also, like, when the time comes for the college football playoff adjustments, I assume that
they would get a
they
auto
would
bid.
probably get an auto bid,
whereas
the Big Ten, the SEC will get like 4 or 5 auto bids. But whatever. Then, from the Pac-12 perspective, we touched on it earlier, but in your opinion, what do they do at this point to keep their conference from falling apart?
So, if they lose those 4, like, and they lose Oregon and Washington as well, and Stanford, that leaves 3 teams. It leaves Cal, it leaves Oregon State and Washington State. Cal is actually kind of interesting because
they're money though.
Because why not? They're a really good school.
No, they're literally bankrupt. Their athletic department has no money.
So that's so interesting.
They could have a few years ago, maybe more than a few years ago. But if you would have said who from the Pac-12 would join the Big Ten, you'd probably say Cal
because they're one of the top schools in the country.
Yeah, so, and they fit in terms of in part of that state school program. They have a large alumni base. They have solid athletics, but. Not recently.
Literally the best engineering program in the entire country.
Yeah.
So
but dude, Cal might be they might join the Big 12.
Yeah.
Would they join the Big 12?
How do you bring in an athletic department that has no money though?
I have no.
They'd have to the Big 12 would have to bail them out almost. And
I don't know. The Mountain West is the move.
Well, I think those teams would end up going to the Mountain West,
and that's terrible.
That's
so bad.
That
kills the school. That kills Washington State, kills Oregon State,
and it kind of kills Cal too because they
kills Cal. But at least Cal's the academics. They'll still get revenue from what's Washington State gonna do?
Nothing. They'll have to those will be teams that'll be scheduling high majors and non-con to make their money.
Which is why it's so upset. That's the upsetting part about the college realignment is the teams that. Pullman, Washington it's just been one of those places that's teams in the Pac-12 hate playing there because it's freezing cold. It's in the middle of nowhere. They have to take a 3-hour plane ride.
USC would have made the playoff if they didn't have to play on a Thursday night.
Fan base. It's crazy. And they're one of the charming programs in college football, and to see them just now they're basically nothing.
Yeah,
it is a hit.
That one's tough. The Oregon State forget about that.
But they were getting better.
I couldn't. They had a good year last year. I could not care one bit about their athletic program. After the 2021 NCAA tournament, I was done with all things Oregon State.
Yeah, so I guess we could talk on the other side. We'll go from one coast to the next. We'll go to the ACC, and their situation's different because they have a grant of rights agreement through 2035, I believe. It basically says that none of the ACC schools are allowed to leave the conference, collude to leaving the conference, unless they basically want to put their finances in purgatory for a few years. So it makes it super hard for these teams to leave. Again, not impossible. If 8 of the teams, I believe, want to dissolve the grant of rights, they can.
See, the thing is, I think the conferences, here's the thing. If the SEC and Big Ten came to ACC schools and told them, you're going to lose this money from the ACC.
First of all, the conferences themselves are technically not allowed to do that, which is why all the reports say USC and UCLA contacted the Big Ten, which not the case. It's just the conferences can't really it's collusion. It's a big thing.
I get it, but the thing is,
if they want
the SEC and ACC or SEC and Big Ten could financially support those schools while they were under fire from the ACC.
They could. Teams like Notre Dame could financially support them by themselves.
Notre Dame doesn't have that problem because they're an independent
Notre Dame
school.
can do whatever they want. But Notre Dame also is in a tricky situation because their TV rights agreement ends in 2025 with NBC. So they are in no rush to change it.
The other problem is, does this, if the SEC takes 2 or 3 ACC schools and the Big Ten takes 1 or 2 ACC schools, is that agreement then gone? And the Big 12 can just take who they want? Because
yes, if 8 schools dissolve the grant of rights, it's over, which means it's fair game for everyone. But you can try to count out the 8, unless, because there's also a term in it that says that a school will void the contract if they collude to dissolving. So it's the contract's really poorly written, super complex, but.
There's got to be loopholes you can find.
There are loopholes, but again, it's so poorly written that it's impossible to get out of.
Yeah,
because there's no basis on it. Someone's going to get sued, and it's really complicated. Again, never sign a contract that long if you're thinking that you might leave, but very interesting.
The ACC, they're kind of second tier schools are interesting on what they do.
Because their second tier schools are better than the Pac-12 second tier.
Way better. Way better, both academically and athletically.
I mean, we're calling Virginia a second-tier school in the ACC. That, they can find a place to play.
Yeah. So same with Virginia Tech, same with Louisville, same with Pitt.
Which is why I would like to see maybe a Big 12 ACC combination. Just have 30 teams or something.
The interesting one to me, I guess they're a second-tier ACC school just because of how college athletics are ran, is Duke.
Yeah.
Because Duke's football program is very poor. Very, very poor.
Do you want to hear my proposition for Duke?
You're going to say they go to the Big East.
I'm going to say they go independent in football.
And play basketball in the Big East.
And play basketball in the Big East. Or play basketball somewhere.
I would be fine with that.
Yeah.
And the thing, I'd be fine with if their football program and, became, mid-major and played, the American or something like that. And then, the rest of their programs went to the Big East.
I mean, again, I think there would be demand for Duke's basketball brand if they were on a different level, revenue sharing tier. Mm-hmm. Let's say the Big Ten, for example, UNC comes, but they say, listen, we want to bring Duke for basketball. The Big Ten can then say, okay, Duke can go independent for football. They can come in and play basketball with us, but they're on a completely different revenue sharing tier. So they're not making the $100 million that the other schools are making, but they're still making what their basketball programs were.
Because their basketball program is a moneymaker. I looked it up the other day. I think a couple years ago they were making $32 million a year in basketball, which is that's a lower tier Big Ten school for football would make. So
and that would be fine. And I think the key of this is that the Big Ten is all the leverage. They can really, if there's no ACC for Duke to play basketball, and their next options are the Big East, or the Big Ten for basketball only.
And what would be really interesting is if the Big East came in and tried to poach all the basketball teams that didn't have football programs.
Yeah, make their football programs all independent.
They tried. They went and got a Duke. They went and got Gonzaga, and then they went and even Kansas. I think would be interesting because
Kansas should stay in the Big 12.
Obviously they should.
They're going to be making a lot more money.
Yeah, no, they should, but their basketball program is a moneymaker, and their football program is not. Their football program is obviously going to be one of those programs that that's beneficiary.
With some of the numbers thrown out, I feel like even the Big 12's network, if they can acquire some of these other schools, I think their network agreement is still going to pay out larger than a basketball only Duke going to the Big East.
But a Syracuse would be interesting for the Big East, and then I think Memphis maybe as well because. They're in a really bad situation right now.
Yeah, in that conference they recently acquired a bunch of.
It was the it was the conference USA. It was North Texas, UTEP maybe, I forget who else.
Yeah, it was UTSA, I think.
Yeah, but no, they're in Western Kentucky. Maybe they're in a bad spot because their football program is too big to play in the American, but
they have a good football. Their football program is not terrible like these other schools.
Right, that's what I
win. They can win in the maybe the Big 12 wants Memphis.
Maybe.
They fit the.
They have
Tennessee's huge.
They have a football profile, so
I haven't seen that at all.
Yeah, that's the thing with this is because Memphis' football program is too big for the American to support it.
Yeah,
their brand football is just way bigger than.
Memphis, I feel can play Power 5 football.
Or
they Power 5, Power 3, I guess.
Yeah, they absolutely can, which is why I think the Big 12 is interesting.
Yeah, are they going to be upset that their basketball programs can become second
if not, who takes them? The Mountain West is a slightly bigger conference than the American, but
it's some of these the really interesting aspects of this are the schools that you're not sure what they're going to do. I'm trying to think of some of these other examples.
NC State.
Very interesting. It gets more interesting when you have multiple teams from the same state that are trying to.
Louisville is an interesting one to me because they feel like SEC.
Louisville to the Big 12 feels very likely.
Yeah,
I would almost call that a lock.
So after the Big 12 gets these,
could we count the Big 12 schools? I think every team we think of is just going to
be the Big 12 with all their additions. The Big 12 not including their additions of the Pac-12 schools is at 12 teams right now.
But you're including Cincinnati, UCLA.
Yeah, no, I'm including those four. Which
they're at how many?
12.
12.
Because they lost Oklahoma and Texas, and then they added.
And the magic number is 20, so we need 8 teams.
So if you add the 6 Pac-12 teams, they have 2 spots.
Okay, and then if you add, who else do we say? Oh, so maybe the AC. Who would they add from the ACC?
I think Virginia Tech and Pitt would be the two.
Virginia Tech and Pitt. Do they go 24?
and then they could add NC State, Georgia Tech, Virginia, and then maybe like a Memphis or Boston College,
or a leftover from what from like let's say Miami for some reason is not picked up.
Yeah, I'm trying to think like maybe Duke entices them because of their academics.
But here's the thing too: maybe Miami wants to be like the top dog in a Big 12 conference. Like they want to be the best of that conference, just like how Texas and Oklahoma were the best out of that.
From a casual fan perspective, they would get absolutely torched for that.
No, they would get torched, but they would be the best team in that conference.
Yeah, no, easily.
Well,
Baylor, Oklahoma State
TCU.
would be the next two. TCU is a weird situation right now.
See, at what point do we expand into non-American colleges?
Non-American.
At this rate, we need more schools.
Yeah, we do need more schools. We need more FBS teams. this is like I'm looking at the Aaron Torres draft. Like, I don't know who he did this with. Dan Byer, who I've never heard of. But this is so interesting to me because if the SEC and Big Ten both picked 6 more teams, like Duke and UConn would not be 2 of them.
I don't think anyone's picking Duke as here's what we're doing. They're gonna pick Duke if they're falling apart and want extra on top.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if they want like the extra. Honestly, it's whatever between the Big Ten and the SEC.
I would love Duke up here in the Big Ten.
Duke makes sense in the Big Ten. They really make sense.
I would love it. They'd play all these road games up here.
Dude, you could have the Northwestern of the Midwest. You could have the Northwestern of the West Coast. You could have the Midwest of the East Coast.
Yeah.
There's Northwesterns everywhere. You have Stanford, Northwestern,
and Duke. Yeah. Now you just need a Vanderbilt and you're set.
Yeah, and honestly, maybe we'll fix the profile too. We'll have a pod because we're talking about the Big Ten pods. We have the non-Ivy League school pod with Stanford, Northwestern, Duke.
Northwestern and Stanford in football every year would be something else. They played 3 years ago, didn't they?
Yeah.
I feel like
I want to see Stanford in a conference that's going to push them to actually use their resources for football.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're pretty satisfied with going 7-5 every year and being still the 3rd biggest moneymaker in the Pac-12.
You know what? Stanford in the Big Ten West right now wouldn't probably go 7-5. They might go 8-4. The Big Ten West currently is pretty bad. Or do you think that Stanford is?
I think Stanford in this upcoming year would probably be the 5th best team in the Big Ten West.
Stanford last year?
Stanford last year was awful, but they beat.
They
beat Oregon.
No. So. Stanford as a good Stanford, an 8-4 Stanford.
Oh,
in the Big Ten West last year with last year's Big Ten West team.
Back in 2015, 2014, right when the playoff was starting, those Stanford teams.
Yeah, Shaw had
those Stanford teams consistently win the West.
It was still Harbaugh.
They consistently win the West.
It was still Harbaugh's influence was still there.
Yeah.
Now that we're years removed from Harbaugh at Stanford.
I don't think Shaw is bad. I just they're not using they're not using what they have. Yeah. And I don't think they should be awful this year.
Well,
but
you know what killed Stanford? It was the early signing day.
Yeah.
Because Stanford, if you want to play football at Stanford, you need to get into school first.
Yeah.
But the problem is the early enrollee date or the early
is before Stanford.
The early signing day is before the acceptance date.
Yeah.
So these guys aren't going to sign on to a school they're not accepted to yet, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
they can't. It's not legal.
They might be screwed, honestly.
Yeah.
In terms of,
but you mentioned something to me last week. Could the Big Ten get the NCAA to move the early signing day?
They could, but the SEC will say no way. The SEC loves the early signing day.
Well, yeah, because the SEC is a bunch of mostly low academic schools.
No, they
that's the only reason Vanderbilt's in the conference. It carries its academics.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I'm trying to think of what we haven't gone over relating to realignment. We talked about the Pac-12 side. We talked about the Big 12. We talked about ACC, Big 10, SEC.
Little Big East.
Let's end on the overarching effect on maybe a prediction. It could be specific teams.
I want to know I've been curious about what the college football playoff format's going to look like when this is all said and done.
12 teams. Okay. 5 from both the Big Ten
and the SEC
and 2 more stragglers.
Big 12 gets 2.
Yeah.
Interesting.
That's what I see.
It's just interesting to me because
maybe 1 at large, have 13, give someone
because
14, give some.
The thing is, I don't think there are gonna be ACC teams that are left out just because of the unless all these conferences go to 24. There are going to be ACC teams left out.
Yeah.
Because there's just statistically not enough spots.
Well, what if you do this? So the real reason why the playoff is so talked about is because the playoff's owned by ESPN or Fox, and they're trying to like make the most money by having the most amount of their teams that they have media race in to make money. So what about this? The Big Ten, it's a little NFC AFC type thing.
Okay.
The Big Ten and Fox runs their own playoff. Okay. Let's say there's gonna be 20 teams. We'll have 10 teams that make the playoff. Okay. In a full maybe three. Would it be 4 games? I believe.
Yeah.
In the playoff, fine. 4 games in the playoff. Okay, they'll play at the Rose Bowl Stadium. They'll play at Lucas Oil. They'll play in all these big venues in these big cities. The SEC does the same thing. Mm-hmm. Okay, the winner of the Fox Big Ten playoff and the winner of the ESPN SEC playoff play in the national championship game, which is crazy.
Yeah, that would be interesting. I don't where would the Big 12 fit in that?
No, they don't. No, this is the worst. This is the nightmare for the Big 12.
Yeah, no, the Big 12 just gets completely left
They'll
out.
They'll play their own tournament and call
being
themselves the national champions.
Yeah.
Okay?
UCF would get to claim it again.
Yeah, listen, we're going so far in the future that we're going back to claim national championships.
Yeah.
So honestly, I'm okay with this as well.
Yeah, no, but I don't have a problem with it. But it's so interesting to me because the idea that I came up with a couple years ago is not a couple years ago, but a week ago. If the ACC survives, which it doesn't look like it's going to,
it might though.
But if
they have the grant of rights,
if the ACC survives, what you do is you expand to 6 teams, which seems unlikely, but I prefer smaller playoffs because I think they work better. But you go to 6 teams. Your top 2 seeds are your SEC champion, Big Ten champion. Your 3 seed and 4 seed are your ACC and Big 12 champions, and then the 5 and 6 seeds are the runner-ups in the SEC and Big Ten, and the SEC and Big Ten runner-ups play the first round of the playoff at the ACC and at the Big 12 champion site.
I just think that, with the way the conferences are going, the Big Ten and the SEC are so much more competitive. Teams are going to have more losses and, still be better teams. To me, one ACC champion is worth, 3 or 4 Big Ten runner-ups, you know? Does that make sense?
Right.
From
No, I also think, I think, when this comes, your idea of, a Big Ten and SEC playoff, just play 10 conference games and then go into this, or play 12 conference games.
Was it round robin?
Obviously there are too many teams to play an exact round robin, but you have your 3 or 4 designated matchups every year.
So you basically say no committee, screw the committee.
Yeah, dude, I hate this committee. Who likes this committee?
Well, ESPN likes the committee because they can choose what teams they want in or not.
ESPN also likes the committee because they get to have their show every week and it makes them money.
Exactly. But I like that idea that you just do a standing system, just like the NFL.
Yeah.
And you just have seeds. How about this? The same seeds from each side play their first round matchup against the corresponding SEC. It's the Big Ten 4 seed plays the SEC 4 seed. Or no, it would be
Big Ten 4 seed plays the SEC 1 seed.
Yeah.
That would be interesting.
Wouldn't that be fun?
That would be almost like World Cup.
Think about the bragging rights. Think about the Big Ten upset Georgia, Minnesota beat Georgia or something.
It would Minnesota beats Georgia. It would also completely eliminate conference bias and regional bias.
Yeah.
Listen,
make it bigger. How about this? You have. Okay. I'm building this out right now.
Do you know what I'm about to say? We're getting into Mike Leach territory right now.
No. Here's what I'm building now. Okay, I'm saying that there are 6 teams. So each Big Ten, SEC, Big 12 combines with the ACC to become the Coastal Conference. Okay, so now you have 3 conferences.
Yeah.
Big Ten, SEC, Coastal. Okay, Coastal has more teams, but they're going to get less spots in the playoffs. So here's how it works: 3 conferences is difficult because now you need to match up based on seedings. So you have, let's say, 6 teams from the Big Ten, 6 from the SEC, so you have 12. And then let's do 4.
4 from the Big 12.
4, okay, so that's 16 teams.
Which is perfect.
That's what they wanted anyway. They wanted a 16-team playoff.
Yeah.
Okay, you match up based on, this is where if you want a committee to sell your shows or whatever, this is where the committee then ranks all these teams. Okay, now that is your playoff, seeding, okay? And then you play your playoff seedings. Now, you can either do single buys for the
top 8, I think.
Top 8. Or you can do like a double. You could do like certain teams who have, let's say in the Big Ten and SEC, who have maybe lost more games, but like are better teams based on the rankings. Maybe they had like a double elimination type thing. So you can end up with like an elimination match with like some like, you get like TCU going up against some like Big Ten team, and like TCU doesn't have any losses, but still elimination.
You could also do it that like the top teams, like the top 4 seeds, only have to play 3 games, kind of like how the old Big East tournament was, and that way you could get both aspects in, where like you play the first couple rounds like on campus, but then once you get to like the quarterfinals, like then you get like the neutral sites.
I want home site games.
Yeah,
I want a Southern school to go up to Ann Arbor.
I want to see. I want to see Ole Miss go play at Kinnick in the first round of the college football playoff.
It would be absurd. Think about how cool it would be for the campuses to have that.
No, it would. Like these kids would all stay over break to see this.
And I think it makes everyone happy. It makes the top schools in all the conferences happy. Mm-hmm. The Coastal Conference, the new one I created, is ecstatic.
Yeah, they get their spots. Teams. They get their spots.
Yeah. The SEC is happy because they have a ton of teams in there, and they have home sites that can be. Like, the home team will have the media rights for that game. Yeah. So, like, the SEC and the Big Ten are fine. Fox and ESPN, great. They split the amount of games. Mm-hmm. I think it's a good for everyone. And the Final Four will be nuts. Because then you play, like, one game at, like, the Rose Bowl Stadium. You play one game at, like, New Orleans. You play one game in Indy. One game, like, the East Coast somewhere.
And, like, you can keep the committee involved, which makes money. And it's still, like... You still make it so the teams have to earn it to be there.
Exactly.
Both in the regular season and the playoffs.
We're going to end it on that. I think that's a brilliant idea. But again, thanks for listening. Jonathan, thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me on. This was a ton of fun.
Yeah, and also if you guys into like college basketball stuff, your summer project, it's like selection summer,
right?
Yeah. It's going on right now, so make sure to check that out. It's awesome. I was on one of the episodes of the Marathon to March.
Yeah.
Very good. Again, thanks for listening. We might have, in terms of after Whistle, we're going to have more, I think, NBA free agency pod coming up. So stay tuned for that. Again, thanks for listening.